So I'm going to turn it over to Taya. We are going to have a little bit of a geography lesson because Taya lives in a really awesome spot, somewhere I've always wanted to visit. And maybe we can have a couple of hints. I don't know. Katie, are you going to put up the map and we can maybe let Taya invite the students?
Taya could, because she might be able to pull up a map on her screen. She has control at the moment. But
Okay.
yeah, you could give us some clues and maybe the kids could guess. Taya.
Oh, I will. I will. Don't worry.
Okay, so over to you, Taya.
All right. Hello, all. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I am really happy to be here and to be able to share all this exciting polar bear information with you guys today. So first of all, let's see if I remember how to share my screen. How about that? There you go. So, like Mally said, there you go. I work with Polar Bears International. We're a nonprofit organization, and we work to conserve polar bears and the sea ice that they depend on. Now, we do this, talking to the media. We do this by doing a lot of research, and we also do a lot of outreach, like talking to you guys, for example, is also part of my job. So I've been researching polar bears for the past 16 years now, and it just continues to be exciting and really awesome. So I'm really looking forward to your questions, but first, I'm going to talk a little bit. So let's see. There you go. This is the first hint as to where I'm from. Anyone? What is this? I'm sure you can tell. So these are Legos, as I'm sure everyone is yelling at home. And I'm sure most of you guys are around here in Canada, maybe some guys in the US, I'm not entirely sure. But I am, you have to go all across the North Atlantic and over here to Denmark, which is a teeny tiny country. It's one of the Scandinavian countries. It's very small. We're like maybe 6 million Danes living here. But what we do have, there are two reasons why you probably know us. One is Lego. Lego was invented here in Denmark, and we have the original Legoland. And I've been there many times as a kid and as an adult, and it's still great. Also, I'm sure some of you are into fairy tales. So if you are, you probably heard of Hans Christian Andersen and The Little Mermaid, for example. And he was also Danish. So I'm here in Aarhus. This is Copenhagen. That's our capital, but I am over here. So that was just to let you know where I'm coming from. Let's get back to the presentation. All right. So also, if you see it getting a little bit dark here, it's just because of the time difference, because right now it is 5:30 p.m. So almost dinner time. All right. So Denmark, you can see my pointer, is down here. You can't see it. We're just outside the map, but we don't have any polar bears. Polar bears live all around the Arctic, the high Arctic. So right up here is the North Pole, and then you have polar bears all around. So we talk about the 5 polar bear countries, and one of those countries is Denmark. Not Denmark itself, but Greenland. Greenland is a part of Denmark, so this is one polar bear country. Then we have Norway. Now Norway actually is down here, but there's this group of islands up here called Svalbard or Spitsbergen, and there's a lot of polar bears living up there. So Norway is the second polar bear country. Then we have, my mouse disappeared, here, then we have this enormous coastline that belongs to Russia. So many polar bears in Russia. And then over here we have, so Russia was the third country. Over here we have Alaska, which of course belongs to the US. So America, United States, is the 4th polar bear country. And then we have the biggest polar bear country of them all, which is Canada. So you can see there are a lot of populations. So there's a lot of polar bears in Canada. In fact, it's 2/3 of the world's polar bears are Canadian. They probably don't know that, but they are. And so all these little, we call them subpopulations, all these little, there's Davis Strait, Fox Basin, Western Hudson Bay, all of these, they are a designated subpopulation. So there's only one only one species of polar bear, but they live in 19 different groups, if you will. All right. And actually, all of these groups, if you have a look here, there's something special about them. Now, up here in the Arctic Basin around the North Pole, there's hardly any polar bears up there. Here, if you look at this other map, you'll see that some of the areas are colored purple, and this is the areas where you find the most polar bears. And what's special about these areas is that they're right over the continental shelf, which is a shallow area under the water close to land. And these are the areas where you have the most production in the water column. So this is where you find a lot of shrimp, a lot of krill, a lot of fish, a lot of seals. And polar bears have to have something to eat. So they are mainly found in these shallow areas with high productivity in the water. I also wanted to show you guys that actually the most southern polar bears are down here in James Bay, and that's the same latitude as London, England. So that's pretty far south. It's a lot colder over here, though, than it is in London, but it's still interesting to see how far south they actually do exist. So I'm sure most of you have heard that polar bears are dependent on sea ice. If you don't have sea ice, you don't have a polar bear, because they just cannot live there. But why do they need sea ice? Why is it so important for them? So there are 4 main reasons. The first one, and this is incredibly important, is the one in the top right corner, is to hunt. So polar bears need to eat seals. Seals are nice and fat, and polar bears need that in order to stay healthy, in order to survive long term. And so polar bears are really strong swimmers, but they don't swim very fast, right? And so seals, of course, are very fast in the water. So in order for the polar bears to be able to actually catch the seals, they need to have this platform of ice. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, like how they hunt, but they need the sea ice in order to be able to catch their prey. They also need the sea ice for traveling. Of course, they could also swim, but swimming costs a lot more energy, so a lot more calories than actually walking on the sea ice. And of course, they have to walk on the sea ice because they need to get to where the seals are. They have to get to the supermarket. Otherwise, they're not going to get anything to eat. They also need to walk on the sea ice because this is where they find their mates. Every spring, polar bear males, will seek out polar bear females that are without cubs and mate with them and make sure that we have little polar bear cubs coming out of the den with their mom almost a year later in the spring. So the last thing that they need, polar bears need sea ice for, is for maternity denning. So polar bear females, they make a den where they have their young, where they give birth to their cubs and they nurse them for 3 months or so. And this den, sometimes it's on land and sometimes it's out on the sea ice. That really varies between, I was showing you all the 19 different subpopulations around the Arctic. It varies between the different subpopulations, but some of them also have their dens out on the sea ice. So sea ice, like we were just talking about, is super important for polar bears. However, it's incredibly important to every other species that lives in the high Arctic too, because actually sea ice is kind of the soil. Like sea ice is to the Arctic what soil is to a forest. So really, it's where everything starts. So here is the Arctic ecosystem. You see the sea ice with the polar bear on top. And then underneath the sea ice, you have these little saltwater channels as the ice is melting. And inside those channels, you'll have algae growing. And these algae are then eaten by slightly bigger algae that are called diatoms. Now, the diatoms are eaten by copepods, which are kind of like shrimp, just smaller. And the copepods are eaten by the polar cod, which is a super cool fish, also literally because they really handle the Arctic and the cold water really well. And then the polar cod is then eaten by the ringed seal, which is one of the major prey items for polar bears. So you see the healthy sea ice is important at both ends of the food chain. It's important for the polar bear because without the sea ice, they can't catch their seals. But it's also really important for the algae that actually create the whole bottom of the food chain that leads up to the ringed seals that the polar bears then eat. So sea ice, important for everyone making a living in the high Arctic. Oh, and I just wanted to show you some of the seals. So this one up here in the left corner is a ringed seal. It's, how big it is? It's about one adult, a human adult big. And then on the right here, you have the bearded seal, which is like 2 or 3 times as big as the ringed seal. So only the slightly bigger polar bears really get to catch the bearded seals mostly, just because you need more strength to be able to pull something that big out of the water, right? And then of course we have the little pup, the seal pups, which, you know, the seals, especially the ringed seals, they pup in the spring. And when they do, these little pups, they are adorable. I agree with you, yeah? But what they also are is they're just this little morsel of fat, yeah? And polar bears love to eat fat. And these guys, for their first, maybe up to their first week, but at least the first couple of days after they're born and they've started, nursing and getting fat, they don't really swim a lot, so they're really easy for the bears to catch. So these seal pups, incredibly important for polar bears. So one of the ways that polar bears will catch seals is just by being patient, very patient. So seals are marine mammals, as are polar bears, and they need to get up and breathe every now and then. They can't breathe underwater. So they maintain these breathing holes in the ice, and the polar bear will just sit there, or like in this picture, just lie there and wait. Yeah? And then once the seal comes up, it'll just either swap it with its huge, like dinner plate-sized paw, or just grab the head with its jaws and pull the seal out of the water. And if it's successful, and often it's not, but if it's successful, then that's food for about a week. Oh, and then I just wanted to, so easy to talk a lot. I see I'm already talking more than I planned to. So I just want to say that as researchers, we talk about polar bear fatness. And this is the scorecards. You can see there are 5 categories. And every time researchers see a polar bear, we score that polar bear. Is it skinny? Is it average? Is it very fat? And so we mostly look at the rump, because this is where polar bears store most of their fat. But we also look at the stomach. This line here, is it flat or is it more round? So even if you see polar bears in the zoo, you can also try and use this. Like, you can look at these 2 areas and you can compare it to the scorecard. So I think that was my first half. And I'm just going to play this video and then maybe we can take some questions. How does that sound?
Perfect.
All right. See. Should I be able to see the questions?
No, we'll have the questions after the video.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it's just, I was thinking it could just play in the background. It's just a little loop of polar bears out on the sea ice just doing their thing. This one absolutely had a good day of hunting. So it's just a little loop that's playing. Polar bears are really good at navigating sea ice. They're really good at feeling where they can walk, where it's not solid enough to walk. And if it's just in between, they can actually, like, they'll look like a starfish. So they'll like spread out their legs, front and hind legs, just to distribute the weight and to get across the ice, hopefully without falling in.
So students, maybe you can type, I see that you're typing some questions in the chat. Gibbler would like to know, we know that the polar bear is the apex predator, but are there any predators of polar bears?
Right, that's a good question. So only humans, really. Yeah, like humans in some areas, there's a regulated hunt for polar bears. And yeah, that's about it. There have been found polar bear remains in the Greenland shark. But, you know, we think because the Greenland shark it's not fast, it's not ferocious and all of that. So we think it's just because they have found a polar bear in the water that was already dead, and then they scavenged on it. Yeah.
Awesome. And thanks for that great answer. Maddie says that the polar bear babies are cute, which they are, just
absolutely.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about how the mama looks after her cubs and how long they stay with her.
Yeah. So, hang on. I'm just gonna let's see there. Oh, wanted to go to there you go. So it takes quite a while to learn how to be a good polar bear and a successful polar bear, right? Because your habitat, the place that you're living, is constantly moving around. The food is never in the same area. And it's a harsh environment that you have to learn to survive in. And so polar bear cubs are with their moms for up to 3 years. So 2 to 3 years, depending. It's a long time, and they are really good moms. Polar bears are. You know, they start out in the den with their mom, and they're in this tiny place for 3 months where she's just nursing them and taking care of them, and then they emerge from the den together in the spring, and then she's still taking care of them, and she hasn't eaten for up to maybe 8 months. Yeah, I feel like that's some serious self-sacrifice.
Absolutely. Eleanor asks, so this is a great question. I love this because we learned about the seals from Darren in Alaska, but do baby bears have a special call for their mom?
Ooh. So polar bears don't make a lot of noise because they're mostly alone, so they don't really have to. But baby polar bears, polar bear cubs, they can do this scream. I don't know what else to call it. Like, it's definitely, it will get your attention. We do actually have on our website, we have like a whole range of the different sounds that you can hear when the bears are in the den. So I can find that link and send it later, and you guys can go and have a listen.
Yeah, and we'll put it on our resource page. So that, because we have some of your resources there already for Polar Bears International, but that would be really cool to have an audio clip. Really super cool. And then the kids can practice that. Okay, any more questions, guys? Or shall
Mally and Tia, Ev and I had a question, and we're just wondering about swimming and polar bears. And, you know, if the sea ice is gone, can't they just swim to another piece of sea ice?
So they can absolutely swim pretty far, but only the adults. So if you're a young polar bear cub, they haven't really built up that good layer of body fat that they need to keep insulated while they're swimming. So young cubs, they can survive probably 10 minutes in the water every now and then. But if it's longer than that, they actually risk getting too cold. So maybe even so cold that they can't survive. So for the adults and, the fat adults, sure, they can swim, but not the young ones quite so much.
Okay. Any more questions, or can Taya go on to the next little bit?
We'll move on, and then if there are more, you just let me know, and we'll take them as it comes. Yeah?
I think they're mesmerized, Taya, because I certainly.
Yeah, I love that video. Did you take that video?
I did not. I usually travel with my binoculars instead of a camera. So, but luckily, other people love filming and they love taking pictures, and are kind enough to share, which also helps.
This is so special. Okay. Awesome.
So,
thank you.
All right. So for polar bears, survival of the fattest is survival of the fittest. So the fatter you are as a polar bear, the better off you are. You're healthier. It may be a little bit hard to get around, but you're doing really well. Like, you're a successful polar bear. And actually, this bear that you see here, we rarely see bears. This is a category 5, which was very fat. We rarely see these bears anymore. But this particular one, like, she could hardly walk anymore. So she was doing really well. And the researchers that had her in hand, this was in the 80s, they were supposed to put a satellite collar on her, but she was just too big for any of the satellite collars that they had with them. So instead, they glued this little satellite tracker to her head. Yeah, I mean, it didn't last very long, but it gave them a couple of positions of where she was going and what she was doing. So I love this picture, and I wish that we had more polar bears of this caliber. So the reason why it's good for polar bears to be fat, there are two main reasons for that. The first one is it is awesome. It makes them strong. It increases their chances of survival. So when polar bears can't find food, if there's a period of time where there aren't any seals nearby, or if there's a period of time where they're forced to be on land because the sea ice has disappeared, for example, usually during the summer months, then they have to live off of that body fat that they've stored, while they were on the sea ice, while they were eating seals. They have to live off of that fat while they're on land. And so, the fatter they are when they come on land, the longer they can last for, and the healthier they're still going to be once they can get back out on the sea ice and find some more seals. So that's why it's good to be fat for bears. It's also because I couldn't find any polar bear cub clip art, so this is it. It's also because for the females, like I said, like the pregnant females or the new moms, the ones with the new cubs, they don't eat up to 8 months while they're, as they're in the den with the cubs and as they're nursing the cubs, and they also have to keep themselves alive and for 8 months. So they have to be fat before they go into the den and before they have their cubs, because they need to take care of themselves and of the cubs, not just inside the den, but also once they're outside. Because, although the cubs, they'll try and nibble a little bit of seal, they'll start to learn what it tastes like and what's good to eat, what's not good to eat, all of this. Even though the cubs do that almost as soon as they're out of the den, the mom will still nurse them for a year, maybe 2 years. So she needs body fat not just for herself, but also for the cubs. And what we see is that if we have thinner females, like skinnier polar bear skinnier polar bears, really, the moms will have fewer cubs, and the cubs that they have are going to be smaller and skinnier. And that means that, a small, skinny cub doesn't stand quite the same chances as a nice, sturdy, fat cub. So that's why it's incredibly important for polar bears to be able to put on some of that fat. Now, I know a lot of you have probably heard about climate change, or I hope so. And what it is just that when we burn fossil fuels, we create these gases or release these gases that act like a blanket that traps heat around the Earth. So the more coal and oil and gas that we burn, the thicker this blanket is going to be. And that means that the Earth can't really, get rid of all the extra energy. All the energy we get from the sun, we have to get rid of some of it, or it will just get too hot here. And the sea ice will melt, and there are many other weather phenomena that are caused by this. So, although we know that climate change is a reality, we understand what's happening. We also know that together we can reduce these gases, the CO2. And there are many different ways that we can do this. But honestly, for you kids at home watching right now, one of the most important things you guys can do is to learn about polar bears, learn about climate change, see how you're feeling about it. A lot of people have a lot of emotions around climate change and polar bears and sea ice. They can be good, they can be bad, but it's really good just to talk about them. Like talk to your parents or your uncle or your teachers or, all the adults in your life. And of course, with your friends too. So important to remember that polar bears, they live far away from where you are, but we can still make a difference, all of us, and we still have time, because the beautiful thing about ice, sea ice, and all kinds of other ice is that, if you turn the temperature up, it will melt. But if you turn the temperature down, it will actually regrow, so it will come back. So we can absolutely do something about this. And there's so many things that we can do, changes in our everyday lives. We have a lot on our website, so many different community actions and ideas and lesson plans and some of the things that you guys can do in your everyday life is, for example, the No Idling Challenge. So when you guys are out driving, waiting for something, picking something up, just turn off the car. Don't idle. Because when you're idling, you're literally just burning fossil fuels for no reason whatsoever. So that's one pretty easy thing that you can do in your everyday life. Then there is what we call thermostat action. So maybe you and some friends, you can have a little competition going and see who remembers to turn down the thermostat. Yeah. Maybe, put on an extra sweater and turn it down just a little bit during winter. In the summer, maybe see if you don't need it quite so cool. And by doing that, by doing this thermostat action or thermostat challenge, you can actually save a lot of energy. There's so many different community programs. A lot of places, they have bike sharing programs, and that's super awesome. I know here where I live, I don't have my own car, and one of the reasons I don't is because we have a car sharing, car sharing program, like an electrical car that we're sharing with a bunch of other people. And it's amazing. It's so nice. I don't have to worry about having my own car. It's such a small cost, and we can just book it whenever we need to have an electrical vehicle or have a vehicle. So there's so many things that you can do in your own community, and I want you all to know that you are very important in this. Oh, let's see. Yeah, yeah. This is the last slide I have here. I just wanted, this is our website, polarbearsinternational.org. And every year, so today is Earth Day, or tomorrow is Earth Day, is why we're talking. But we also have 3 other days that we celebrate every year. And every time we do that, we have so many different like actions you can do, and we give you information on how you can make a difference. And the most important one for us, of course, is International Polar Bear Day, which is every year, February 27th. Then we have Earth Day, we have Arctic Sea Ice Day in July, and then we have Polar Bear Week, which is a whole week just full of polar bears. Yeah, so go check us out. And let's see. Hang on. There we go. Go check us out and see all the different activities that we're doing.
So that's great, Taya, to give them some information. And Maddie says she's going to do all of those things. Gibbler says his house is kept at 68 degrees in the winter, which
Nice.
is great. Elise said, me too, to doing all of those actions. And I'm sure by the end of the week, we'll all know a few more actions that we can take to help the polar bears and also to help the earth and become eco-warriors. We've used that term before.
So I like that.
Students, I love that term. I love that one. Does anyone else have some questions for Taya? It can be about polar bears. It can be about sea ice. It can be about the ecosystem. Whatever you'd like to know.
Yeah, we're wondering about that. Is that a real polar bear on your shelf behind you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Not quite. It's I'll just find him. So this. Actually, maybe you guys can help me. This is a polar bear cub. I need a name for him. And I'm not that good with names, so I literally just named him Bear in Danish, which is Bjørn. I need a name. Yeah.
Any name suggestions, guys?
Because I feel like Holly. I like that. Like well, hopefully he'll get fatter. Okay, Harry.
Harry or Snowy?
Is awesome. I really like Harry. Buddy. You know what?
The bear.
Buddy is pretty good. Yeah. You guys are
Rael
awesome at this.
Rael from Iqaluit says Snowball. Gabby says Snowball. Gibbler says he has one named Buddy. So great
JP
suggestions,
said
guys.
Cuddle. Did you see Cuddle? That's cute. I want to cuddle.
But I am ferocious.
I don't see JP.
Or it will be at least. Anyway, it's what do you call it? It's just a puppet that I got last time I was in Canada, working with the bears. Because you never know when you're gonna need a polar bear cub in your house. Yeah.
Oh, MacArthur Makwa. Oh, Makwa is there in Ojibwe.
Nice. You guys, I'm gonna write all of these down.
Taya, I'll send you the chat because we have it all. We get a copy of it, so you can put some thought.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Rael, do you know what the Inuk name is for a polar bear? I know you live in Iqaluit. Nanook in Inuktitut.
Yep.
That could be a cool name too. So you've learned.
Actually, have people watching that maybe have polar bears outside their house, or at least nearby. Or are we not quite far enough north for that?
Yeah, we are, and we see Rael is definitely from Iqaluit, and let me see who else might be here from Iqaluit. Not sure. Only once in a while in Iqaluit and more in other communities, and that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
See, the Ojibwe name was Makwa.
I like that.
Yeah.
You guys are so good at this. I'm gonna have a hard time choosing.
You'll have to let us know, and maybe we can have you back again and talk a little bit more about something else about polar bears because you know so much.
Oh, absolutely. We can talk about polar bear for a long, long time. Yeah.
So I just want to invite the students to come back in, it's about another, I don't know how, at 12:30 Central, 1:30 Eastern, and we're going to read a story about another polar bear. I know that Taya knows this book. We're going to read this story. Oh, Cubby and Blizzard are more names. We're going to read a story about Winston, and we're going to connect with Kevin, and he's going to teach us how to draw a polar bear. So we're really excited because I would love to learn how, and maybe Taya, you can come back and learn how to draw a polar bear.
You know what? I was just actually thinking about it.
You should, because Kevin is a great artist. Maddie's coming. C is coming. I bet you Gibbler and Jean-Paul will be there. Rael, I bet you're going to come, and Kerrigan for sure. I know you love your art. So, the drawing sessions are really great, and we've learned a lot. And we have learned so much from you today, Taya. And I just love the ideas of the names and that the students were also sharing their names. And, MacArthur, of course you're coming. It's an animal session. We're counting on you, Betty. And to learn some names in our Indigenous languages, I think that's really cool for sharing. And
you know what? Sorry, now that we're at it, I'm going to share the whole Danish name for polar bear, because in Danish it's actually isbjørn. So bjørn means bear, is means ice. So in Danish it's ice bear, which to be honest I think it fits a little bit better than polar bear, because I know they're in the Arctic, in the polar region, but really they are ice bears, you know? They're so dependent on it. If a polar bear could choose, it would be on the sea ice 24/7 all year round, just eating seals.
Can you put in the chat, Taya, how we can spell that? Some of the students have learned 3 names.
There you go. Isbjørn.
Isbjørn.
So it's with the O with the line through it. We have 3 letters that you guys don't. These are the 3 ones that we have.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Turned into a cultural lesson as well as something about.
Well, a lot of people don't know.
Well, we are so thankful. Thanks, Taya. We're going to see you later, and take care and be safe. And
likewise.
Let us know the name.
I will. I'll have to think about it. Maybe I'll just put all the names in a little bowl and just pick one at random because they're awesome.
And we'll post that. We'll post the name on the resource page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll send you that sound link so you can hear all the cute little noises that polar bear cubs make.
That could also lead to a pretty neat piece of writing too. Once the polar bear is named, I would love to see some stories come out of that too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. I really enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for your questions. It's always good.
Okay. So we'll see you soon, guys. Take care.